Your choice of words matter, not only in the workplace, but in your everyday life interactions. In this episode of Jam Sessions, we're joined by 3 Jam citizens to dive into what inclusive language is and why it matters to ensuring diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging among your workplace relationships and beyond.
Thank you so much, y'all, for joining us today. And please introduce yourselves and tell us why this topic is important to you.
I'll go first. My name's Kyle Miller. I am one of the software engineering managers on the game services team. Most of you, if you've seen me, is probably around JCL, Jam City Live. And I guess why this was important to me and why this topic is important to me as a manager and even as a team member, I've really noticed that if someone doesn't feel like they're part of the larger team, their participation, their ownership of your product really kind of suffers, and you don't get that diverse set of ideas that might come forward. And while most people, I don't think, are ever malicious in their choice of language, it's kind of that unconscious use of non-inclusive language, whether it be gendered language, language that has negative connotation, language that makes team members feel like they're not part of the larger group. So that's kind of why it's important to me, because I feel like it makes your team really cohesive when everyone feels included.
Great point. Thank you.
Sure. So my name is Jerem Clervius. I'm a senior software engineer here at Jam City. I'm also on the same team as Kyle. And this topic specifically became much more important to me after Kyle introduced it, because this is something that he started to work on. And so we started to talk about it. And as I was going through what it is that he put together, I started to notice that I actually, even as a member of the minority community, multiple minority communities, I actually, I haven't been fully aware of how, some of those terms that I was using actually could have made some people feel left out, especially as a member of the team. And so, I'm very, very happy to be here to talk about this with you guys.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Hurd. I am the director of recruiting here at Jam City, and I've been with the company for about 5.5 years. Had the pleasure of working with so many great people. Thank you for including me in this session. I would say it's really important for me and my team, because Fran always says that we want people to come to Jam City and feel safe and comfortable to be their most authentic self. And we're super focused on hiring a diverse and inclusive workforce here. So recruiting is often the first point of contact that people have when interviewing with Jam City, and ultimately throughout their career here. It kind of sets a tone, I feel like. So it's really important on this end as well.
Simone. So the first question goes to the gentleman. I know that you touched upon a little bit on why this was important to you and sort of like why you started the guide, but I really want to say going above and beyond, right? This is not part of your job description. And so what is it that sparked this saying like one day, okay, you know what, I really need to put this together. This is going to be important for my teams. Like, do you want to tell a little bit of the backstory on the guide creation?
Sure. So last summer, there was kind of becoming a large discussion in the tech community about inclusive language and are we really doing our best, right? Or, is there simple things that we can do that can make everyone feel a little more included? On our leadership team, Aber and Chris had come to the GS team and asked, hey, do we have anything like this documented anywhere ourselves? And if not, could we come up with a simple set of guidelines? And so I kind of took that and said, well, there's a lot of stuff out there from different organizations, other tech companies, non-tech companies. What are the pieces that really apply to developers specifically, but, can be applied to the company as a whole that we can try to do here at Jam City? And it was really trying to take all those best bits and pieces and putting them all together with one place with clear examples of what non-inclusive language looks like and tools that we can use to get there to make our own products, our own code bases, more inclusive and a better all around.
On my end, so around the same time frame too. So around the time last summer when everything was going down with the racial injustice, I think the entire world was noticing that. what I think happened for me personally is that a lot of what I felt about all of that period were things that I found a way or created a way to compartmentalize inside my own mind, to not feel about, to not think about, to not, consider at all how I personally feel about it. And I think when everything was going down, it became increasingly difficult for me, like to separate those things as far as like how I felt about those things and how I approached work from just a personal standpoint. But I became very happy when Kyle brought this up, because that made me feel like at least some of this was being addressed at work, and I felt good. I always felt good, at least to be able to turn to. I'm sure you guys know that we have a very active BE community here, and at Jam City. So we have people to talk to, and we put a lot of like effort into making at least the people here who were impacted by the things that were happening from last summer into right now feel much more comfortable. And so with this, I think this was one of those ways that, especially within the team that I work in, to help contribute to how we push things forward and how to like really solve some of these problems. And the good thing is, like, from our viewpoint, I was actually noticing what other companies were doing, and I was very curious about like what we could do, especially like on the ground level. Every team member, every single person who works at Jam City, and I think this is something that can be done in a different way depending on what team you're on. And I really love the way that we ended up doing it for this team.
Thank you. That's really great. I love it when people take it upon themselves to make it a better place, right? Because we all are champions of our culture, and diversity and inclusion is not just up to one person or one department. And so kudos to both of you that you took it upon yourself to do this and expand on it. So this next question is for all the three of you. And how do you think that we can put these guiding principles into practice? So the guide has like a lot of tools and a lot of examples. And at the end of the day, I know that, some people may have seen the guide or not, but from your point of view, how is it that some of these things are easy to put into place or difficult? I don't know, from your point of view.
I think it depends on the teams, right? Because so for example, for our team, it's mostly engineers, and so we know exactly, like, even deep down in the code, that there are certain places that some of us weren't even thinking about before. Depending on how many of you guys have already seen the actual guide, that there are actually places in the code that we've had to go back and change how we were referencing things. One of the very popular ones, and I think this is across companies, not just ours, GitHub, or at least when you're managing branches, your code branches, the default branch is always called the master branch, right? And so that's something that you don't necessarily think about, well, how could this be considered something that really excludes a certain set of people? But when you think about it, when you go back all the way back to like the days of enslavement, that's not something that you really want to keep perpetuating, even deep down in your code. And that's just a very simple example when you compare everything else that's on the list that Kyle put together. So I don't think, for example, that the same thing that an engineering team did is something that would be very easy for another team to do. But that, I think, is something that, one thing I would say, just like our team had, for example, Kyle, who went about it as a manager and actually championed this forward, I do believe that we would have to have somebody at a leadership capacity to help champion it forward too, and on other teams.
Yeah, I would say the easiest thing to do is just bringing awareness, right? The first thing we actually did was not just go in and make changes right away, was to assess what is in our product, what's in our documentation, what's in our code base that is non-inclusive, right? And, those of you who are early adopters of Jam City Live, you will know that originally, we had whitelist and blacklist as part of our device marking page. And that was actually the very first thing we changed, because it was an easy change. It was forward facing. And over time, we went through and then updated the code to also remove those terms, right? And we've run searches on our code for, words that typically show up on these lists, right? And there's some tools that we've included in the links in that document on ways that you can, add these tools into your code base, even to check for these words and give you, notifications, whether that's part of your build process or something that you just run manually and remind yourself every once in a while. But I think there's definitely some easy things, like you mentioned, changing your GitHub names, doing searches across your code bases for words. But I think the biggest thing is just being aware of what that language looks like, non-inclusive language, and how you can point it out to team members when it's showing up, whether it's in discussions or in your code or in your documentation.
Absolutely. How about you, Simone? How do you think that we can put these guiding principles into place?
Yeah, absolutely. In the guide, if you guys had a chance to check it out, there was whole section on different resources that you could use. And something in recruiting that we do is we often take our job descriptions and we copy and paste them to a site just like Joblint, which was in the resource guide. But if you do a quick Google search, there's a number of them online just to check if we're using any language that favors masculine or feminine or something that might be wording that we would want to take out that isn't completely inclusive. I would say also in all of our recruiter screens that we're having with people, we have a standard set of questions in addition to questions that managers like us to ask, why are you looking to leave and when can you start and all of that. But we have also incorporated, from your perspective, why is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace important to you? Which we think is really important because obviously it's important to us at Jam City, but it's a two-way street. So we want to make sure it's important to every candidate that we're bringing in as well.
Thank you. To remind everyone, because I know that we keep talking and mentioning the guide, so you can head over to our intranet, which is the source of truth when it comes to information. Go in there, go to our DIB page, and under resources, you're going to find tools and guides, or I think it's called guides. And you'll be able to see the words matter right there, and you'll be able to see it. And then it's very important that this is not a stale document. We're going to continue adding to it because I think it's an ever growing, because anything that anybody can may have some ideas on how we can continue to hold each other accountable to have inclusive language every single day, then we definitely want to hear those ideas. So I know that Joram spoke briefly about sponsorship, right? How important is our executives and our leaders are leading by example. Also, how is it that you think that within the teams, and this goes to the three of you, we can hold each other accountable? And how can we have these difficult conversations when sometimes you see that maybe somebody is using the wrong terminology? How do we address it? So now that we're aware of what sort of terminology is out there that we should not be using or we should try to avoid, how do we bring put it into practice, and how do we hold each other, not put it into practice, but how do we hold each other accountable for it? And how do we, have those difficult conversations sometimes?
So I think there's a spectrum of comfortability when it comes to this kind of topic, right? And not everybody will be as comfortable as other people when it comes to addressing someone else if they feel like somebody else said something. So one thing I would say is, if you know yourself to be someone who doesn't mind pointing out, for example, when you say something that, if you catch yourself saying something that probably, may offend someone or may exclude someone else on the team, that you point it out publicly. That way other people notice, okay, well, you know what, you're catching yourself. And what tends to happen, especially when you're around a group of people who are exhibiting a certain kind of behavior, is you put yourself in a position where you're influencing the rest of the team just by the way that you're treating your own words, your own, thought processes and stuff like that. So that's definitely one of the ways that you can help to encourage your other teammates and other people around your team to be held accountable. And I think, of course, there's some people who would want to point it out when somebody else does it, but you definitely want to make sure that this is done in a way that doesn't even exclude that person or discourage them from wanting to participate in helping to encourage inclusivity. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that I did notice that there are a couple of other companies, especially in the tech industry, that are taking a completely different stance on this, right? Like they're issuing kind of rules where we don't want to talk about this kind of stuff at all. And I'm very proud of what Jam City is doing. Like, we're hosting this whole webinar, where we're saying this is something that is important to us, not just, on a public facing way. Like, we don't want to just tell the world that we care about this, but internally we actually do care about it. And these are the kind of things that we're doing to make sure that the people here who work at Jam City feel, that they're being included.
Great.
Yeah, I would say, self-policing, I think, is the easiest way to show an example to the rest. When you catch yourself, because here's the thing, no one's going to be perfect at this, right? There's always times where you pick a word and then you realize after that wasn't the best word, specifically around inclusivity. So just stopping, correcting yourself, and pointing out even why you're correcting it, I think goes a long way in getting other people to start exhibiting the same behaviors. I would say, make it part of your processes. Like, if you do reviews on others' work, make that part of the checklist that you go through. Is there non-inclusive language in this document, in this code, in the product itself? in a message. And using that to be a learning moment and not something to divide even further. There's definitely a tendency in reviews and things like that where they're online you can't assess tone, so you get very curt comments. And if you can find the ways, instead of just having a curt comment, don't use that word, of providing a learning opportunity of here's why. I think the why is the most important part, and it's something that doesn't have to be an everyday thing, but can be part of something that you do, on a periodic basis.
I think that educating yourself, educating others, it's great that we have 150 plus people on this call who are interested in hearing this. So that's a great first step. I would say something that we do internally on the recruiting team, specifically when we're collecting interview feedback. If somebody's a culture add, it's because, we really lean on our pillars here at Jam City. So how they exemplify or don't exemplify those versus potentially personality traits, just to make sure that we're staying inclusive there. We make sure to have really diverse interview panels as much as we can. So I think there's a number of different things that we can do kind of tangibly and intangibly.
Thank you. This is great information. And I love it that the three of you agree that we definitely need to be talking about these things rather than maybe, sometimes people just don't want to address it because they don't know how to do it or have the conversation. And these are difficult conversations sometimes, but we need to address them in the moment so that way people understand and we educate each other and we hold each other accountable. And the good thing is that already Jam City has a great culture where we're open to, voicing our opinion in a, of course, professional way and manner, but we're learning from each other every single day. We don't have all the answers. So, Sibon, since you were talking about recruiting, why is it important to have inclusive language in job descriptions? And I love it that you also said job ad, culture ad and not culture fit, because that's a big one also that we're trying to change when it comes to the culture. Because if you are adding, or if it's a fit, then you're just trying to put somebody kind of like on a box. And so what are your thoughts on the importance of having inclusive language in the job descriptions?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it even goes beyond our job descriptions, but kind of how we advertise on LinkedIn or Glassdoor. And I had a conversation with Josh Brooks the other day who used the analogy of, there are really savvy shoppers out there. And at the grocery store, some people want to know that a lot of people want to know that their products are safe for them. So whether they're looking for a little organic sticker or something that gluten-free, whatever that may be that makes them feel safe to purchase. Similar, we feel that job seekers are incredibly savvy. They're looking for things that stand out to them that are going to make them feel safe and comfortable in the workplace. So again, job descriptions are one of the first things that candidates are seeing potentially about Jam City if they're not familiar with the company. So inclusive language is incredibly important there. Furthermore, we're doing everything that we can to build out our LinkedIns to showcase kind of what we're doing internally here, share and highlight different faces of different people with different backgrounds, different stories, and hopefully this can resonate across all different kinds of people.
I think you touched upon the other question that I had for you was, what are some of the tools that the recruiting team is ensuring to use inclusive language during the recruiting process? So you did mention the decoder. You also mentioned, ensuring that the job descriptions are right. Is there anything specific that maybe you would suggest for a hiring manager right before they go into an interview, so they can remind themselves of it being inclusive, or anything else that you all use in the team?
I would say, again, just when you're collecting feedback from different people on the team to ensure that you're leaning on our pillars for the culture ad. I think that that's really important. I think you should do your homework on the candidate. You can check out their projects that they submitted, check out their resume, make sure that you're asking questions based on the work that they've done, how they're answering the questions. And then again, I would say we've built out a lot of pages on our LinkedIn. We're working with Glassdoor as they have a whole diversity page that we're excited to expand upon. So I think any way that we can make contact with the candidate and make them feel included and comfortable.
In your own experience, and this goes for the three of you, what are some of the words or concepts that maybe have really been the hardest for you to change in your language to ensure that you're being inclusive? I know that in my case, I'm not from the US, but I tend to say you guys a lot. And I really try to catch myself to say y'all. And it helps that I lived in Texas for 5 years. So that's, I got some practice there. But from your point of view, for the three of you, what has been like the hardest concept for you to like really reiterate for you to be like able to be able to change it?
For me, it was not as much around the gendered terms or racial insensitivity terms. It was things around like ableist language. One of my most common words is, "Oh, that's crazy," or "Oh, this, the results of this look crazy," and it's an easy one to change because there's a better word, right? This looks nonsensical. This doesn't look typical. Oh, that's outrageous, right? And it's something that you don't necessarily even think about. That's I think why it was so hard for me. It's not something you think about unless you yourself, either have struggled with mental health or have some family member or loved one that struggled with mental health. And then you start to really, once you put yourself into that situation, you really start to empathize with like, well, yeah, this is, even though it's just something small, can make someone feel like they don't belong now, right?
Yeah. And this happens a lot, right? So if I come up with a certain idea or a certain way to solve a certain problem with one of the tickets that we have in our team, and I'm probably speaking to somebody else on the team and talking about it, I'd say something that along the lines of like the whole ableism thing. I'd be like, well, this should be easy. And not really thinking, well, this might be easy for me, but it's not necessarily always easy to the person who I'm speaking to. And just saying that to them actually puts them in a position where maybe it raises their own anxiety. Like if it's not actually easy for them, then maybe they're thinking, well, does that mean something about myself, from their perspective? And so something like that, could easily put you in a position where you're being condescending to someone without intentionally, doing that.
Fran, you definitely touched on mine, like the culture add versus culture fit. I think culture fit is something that's been, ingrained in us in terms of hiring for so long. And I'm so excited to see people use more inclusive language like culture add, because it is so important, like you said, make sure there's a place for everybody here. It's not a puzzle that somebody has to be, the perfect spot to fill. It's what they're bringing to the team. And that's ultimately how you hire, diverse thinkers.
Super. So last question, if there is one thing our audience could do right after this session, besides checking out the guide, of course, on the internet, what do you think that would be from your point of view? The one thing that the audience could do?
I'd say first thing, have the conversation with your own team, like assess your own project, right? And your own team's language. And it doesn't have to be that everything looks good right away, but like make a plan of attack. How can we make things better? The awareness goes a long way in that journey. And I think that's probably the easiest thing is just have the conversation, talk about it.
Yeah, I think I want to add directly to that too. It's the awareness, right? And so I think it's a little bit difficult. I started to appreciate that difficulty more lately because honestly, I have to admit, I was not as aware as I could have been with the hate against the Asian community, right? And so when everything went down over the summer last year with as far as like racism against the Black community, in my mind, it made it. I started to feel like, well, the people who are saying we weren't aware of this, or that this, are you serious? This is happening? And from my point of view, I was thinking, well, are you sure you didn't know about this? Because to me, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I've just been seeing for my whole entire life. I felt like most people would have seen it too. And so when everything started to happen with the Asian community, that's when I started to realize, well, it is possible that you live within your own bubble and not be that aware of what's happening in other people's lives and in their own bubbles. And so just like Kyle said, right, whatever you could do to raise your own awareness of how other people are experiencing this same life that you are experiencing on this planet, and to help make sure that what you do and how you interact with them does not make them feel less than, then that's probably the best thing that you could do to start.
I would say that I myself am not particularly an expert on this, and I will say that Kyle and Dram did such an amazing job building out this resource for us. So great job that you're checking out our chat here, but if you haven't had a chance to read it in depth, it's amazing and offers some really great insight and some key takeaways. For me personally, I'm a believer in a lot of little changes ultimately create a larger change and a larger shift. So maybe choose one area, like Fran says, hey guys, like, okay, I'm going to commit to saying, hey y'all. And at first it's unnatural, and then that's something you start doing, and then that's your natural default. So I would say read the guide, find a key takeaway that makes sense for you to implement immediately, and see where it goes from there.
Thank you. This has been like a super great conversation. I love all the ideas. I'm like so proud of this guide. I mean, like seriously, other companies should see it, and we should talk about it with other employees and other employee resource groups, because they may be on the beginning of this journey, right? And they don't know how to talk about inclusivity and the language, and it's so little things, but from y'all's point of view, they make such a great and big impact. So I truly appreciate this, and thank you for everybody already joining this conversation and joining us today at the Jam session. That is already a step forward to being more inclusive, because you want to learn. And I encourage everybody to join us on the Belonging at JC channel, also to share your ideas. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much, Kyle, Joram, and Simone today, and everybody that joined us. And this is ciao for now until our next Jam session. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Click to the right for a conversation on women in game design, and click to your left to find out why mobile gaming continues to explode.